My name is Bill Franklin. I was born in Chinook, Kansas in 1931, and I lived and was raised up in San Diego, California. Went into the Army. I enlisted in the Army early in 51, and the reason that I enlisted is that I didn't particularly want to go into the Navy or the Army, so I was going to join the Air Corps. And the Air Force, I went down and did all of my work except for being sworn in, and they was going to take us to Los Angeles to swear us in. And before the bus got out of the parking lot, they stopped the bus, and the guy come aboard and told us that they had all the people they needed, and that was it. So there I was. I'd quit my job, and I had said goodbye to everybody, and I still didn't want to go into the Navy. So I called my brother that was stationed at Camp Roberts, California, and I told him they wasn't going to take me in the Air Force, so I was going to join the Army. And he told me point blank that if I joined the Army, I was going to Korea. And I said, yeah, I realize that. And he says, well, think about it. And so I did, but anyway, I went on down and I joined the Army. And I took my basic training at Camp Roberts, California. At the same time, my brother was there. And early in, I'm a little sketchy on when I completed my basic training, but it was around May or so, and they flew us out at Pittsburgh, California, to the Far East. And I ended up stay over at Hawaii for a day or so, and they moved us on to Japan, and I ended up in Tokyo, and from there they moved us to Sasebo, Japan, and from there they shipped us out to Korea. And after I got to Korea, they moved us on up to the front lines, or above the 38th parallel at that time, and I went through all the replacements and assignments and all that kind of stuff, and I finally ended up being assigned to the 7th Division. And so I went to the 7th Division Depot Replacement Center, and then they was assigning us to our outfits. And I had one fellow that I stuck with most of the time, and when we got to division, they was having a roll call for our assignments, and my buddy and I, we decided that we were going to stay together. Every time there was a formation, that we would be together, so we would be assigned together. Well, I had to go to the latrine, and he come running in. He says, Franklin, come on. He says, get out of here. They're having a formation. Instead of my buddy waiting for me, well, he went ahead and fell in. Well, by the time I got there, there was one man between him and I. And I fell in, and so they came down the roll, and the sergeant, he had a little stick, and he was just, he was going along, and he says, okay, he stopped. He went past my friend and the guy that was between us. He stopped right there, and he said, okay, the 48th Field Artillery. And then he started out with the infantry with me, and my heart sunk. So I was assigned to the 7th Division and to the 17th Regimental Combat Team. And I thought I'd had it right there. I thought, oh boy. So at the division, the the officer that was in charge said that the 17th was going to be coming down to division for a celebration of the outfit that was having a birthday. I'm sketchy on, it was the 100th birthday or the 101st or 2nd birthday of the 17th Regiment. And he said, well, if you go on down there, you'll be able to meet some of the people that you're going to be serving with. And so there was 3 of us that got to be pretty good buddies. So we went down, and the 17th come marching in, and so we were anxious to meet some of the guys. And my first experience in Korea was a tragic one. The outfit that I ended up with, the platoon that I ended up with, and the squad that I ended up with, there was a young man that had accidentally killed his friend right there, right, and I thought, oh, for heaven's sakes, you know, what's going to happen to me? And so that was my introduction to the 17th. Okay, we, after the accident of this young man killing his friend, and we were, I was assigned to Easy Company, 2nd Battalion, and I was assigned to the 4th Squad, which was a weapons squad, machine gun squad. And I'd heard stories from World War II about how long a machine gunner lasted. And so there I was again, like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm not going to make this, I'm not going to make it, you know, and I was feeling down. And but it was after I got out of Korea that I realized how lucky that I was able to meet the fellows that I served with, that I did not go into my company and my platoon and squad under fire, because there was situations where I witnessed fellows that was coming in and they didn't get a chance to know anybody, and what a ordeal that must have been. But I felt very, very lucky afterwards that I ended up in a machine gun squad. And so I had several days, it was 5 or 6 days that I had to get acquainted. And then we moved into up on the front lines. They was starting the offensive in the Iron Triangle. And so we were moving at night towards our objective to where we were going to jump off. We were going to assault Old Baldy, and which was an assignment that we had certain areas that we had to take on Baldy. And when I realized that I was going into combat was when I was getting my ammunition and stuff already, and I was putting some grenades on my harness, and our first sergeant come by. His name was Clark, Sergeant Clark, and I'll never forget that. He come by and he looked down, and I was putting these grenades on my harness, and he says, "You better take a few more of those." And I thought, oh my God, this is it. And it was, and that's when we moved out at night and got into the position where we were going to jump off to assault Baldy. And that was my first experience with combat and moving at night. I was carrying ammo, or I'll rephrase that, ammunition for the machine gun, the light 30. And everybody had to just reach out in front of the fellow in front of him to stay in line because it was pitch black and just couldn't see anything. And I ended up tripping and falling, and I went down the hill and I lost my helmet. The ammunition boxes that I was carrying ended up open. The ammunition was falling all over, so I had to take the belts and wrap it around my neck. And I will never forget that the whole battalion was moving down this ridge at night, and I was having difficulty picking out where, but I finally got my bearings, and I got up the hill, and I got back with my outfit. And we got to the point where we were going to go up the hill, and Sergeant Clark was there, and I went to him and I said, Sarge, I said, I lost my helmet. And he says, don't worry about it. He says, just in a few minutes you're going to have your pick of any helmet you want. And so that made me feel strange, to say the least. And that was, it wasn't long until the fireworks started. And I will imagine that there would be a lot of fellows tell you that it's that waiting for that first shot to happen that's tough. Once it gets going, you don't have time, or you don't think about, you're pumped up with adrenaline, and you just do what you have to do. All right. There are so many stories, and but there are a few that really stick into my mind. And I was online, and this was on Baldy, as I recollect. That no, I'll retract on that. This was a little later. This particular story happened in the Punch Bowl, and this was during the winter time. And it was my turn on guard duty, and nature called, and I couldn't leave my post, but I could go up on the side of the hill and still have a good view of everything. So I cleared out a spot and got everything all set, got all the winter clothes and done and all that. And I started to squat, and I lost my footing. And I must have slid down the hill at least 15 feet with my bare bottom, and ended up in the trench with all this snow scooped up between my legs. And I had a tough night that night. And it wasn't because of the Chinese. Okay. I'm remembering my actual, when we assaulted Baldy, the objective that was assigned to my outfit, Easy Company, was a finger, and we had to go to the crest of the hill, and the whole company had to come up this finger, and that's the way the fighting was in Korea. The route of approach was a finger going up to the crest of the hill, and there was only one way to get there. And so the Chinese, all they had to do is cover this finger. And so all the people that was coming up in one area. Well, we got to the point to where we was almost ready to take the hill. And this is where my hat comes off to the rifleman. And this is when I realized that being in the machine gun squad was not a bad assignment at all, because we gave covering fire. We didn't have to be right up front. Well, the riflemen did. But when we got to the crest of the hill, our fellows was just about there when where I was back giving cover in fire to the infantry guys, I could see where when they almost got there that the Chinese raised up and they would have these grenades in their hands. And with the Chinese grenade was something like the old World War II German potato smasher. The handle, you take the lid off and there was a string that was there that would pull the pin on the grenade. Well, what these fellas would do is they'd put the strings around their, and they'd have like 4 grenades in each hand, and they would chuck them over the hill. And when I looked up, and it was like a rainstorm of grenades coming over, and the fellas had no other choice. They just couldn't go any farther, so they had to pull back. And when we settled up that night, when it got dark, we had to pull off. I had to pull back, and there was another peak down below the crest of Baldy, where my whole outfit was on this little peak. And I will never never forget that we figured that we were going to be wiped out. And that night, we didn't receive any mortar fire. We didn't receive artillery or any of that we were expecting. And the next morning, we went back and took our objective. And it was incredible that we had to go, the whole outfit had to go over in one spot. And each man had to stay down below the crest of the hill, and when it come his time, he would go up and do a spin and just anything that you could to get over the hill as fast as you could and start running. And I will never forget that it became my turn, and I went up and I made it over the top, and of course the Chinese were throwing everything that they could throw at us right there at that one area. That's all they had to do. So there was a lot of bullets flying around, and I got down into this trench, and I didn't have time to be scared or anything. I just wanted to, the machine gun had gone before me, and I had the ammo for the machine gun, and so my whole thought was getting that ammunition to that gun. And I started running down this trench, and I had to step over, had to walk on a body. And it was a black fellow, and I knew that he was in my platoon, and that I knew him, and I never knew for certain who it was, but that was quite a spot. And after I got out of this trench, they were firing at me because they could see that I was carrying ammunition for the machine gun. So it seemed like the whole Chinese army was shooting at me, and I decided I better get into some cover. So I seen this hole, and I went to dive into this hole, and there was a body in the hole, a Chinese fella, and he was shot up real bad. And I had to end up right on top of him. And I just, that's not where I wanted to be, so I decided I was going to get in another hole, and I went to stand up, and there was bullets flying all around me, and one came real close to my head, and I figured I was hit, so I went back down, and I got real close to this Chinese guy. And the gruesome part of it is his skull was missing, and so my face was actually stuck right down into his brains almost. So that wasn't a good time for me. And when I decided that I was going to go to a different hole, well, some other fellows was in the hole that I was going to go to, so I had to go right back to the same one. And they kept the fire pretty heavy on me, and so I kept deciding, well, I got to get out of here. So I was going to make my move, and like a dummy, I put the machine gun boxes up while the Chinese could see that I was coming out, and that's when the bullet came real close to my head. So I went back down and stayed there for a while. It seemed like hours, but it wasn't. And the next time I made my move, I come up out of that hole like a jack in a box, and I went down that hill on my stomach, and the fellows on the machine gun told me the story, the way I was coming down that hill on my belly with my elbows and with the 2 boxes of ammo, and they said they'd never seen anything like it in their life. And I went by the gun and I dropped the ammo and I went on back on the reverse side of the trench to cover the rear of the machine gun. But that was an exciting moment, and I'll never forget it. Okay, I got through the summer, and I was wounded on Baldy and went to the hospital, and I came back and was reassigned back to my unit, and this was when winter was coming on. And out of all the different wars that our country had been in, the difference between Korea and Vietnam and the wars since then is that it would have to be the weather. I know that anybody that is in combat goes through their own ordeal, but the winters in Korea, and especially the winter of '51, it is on record that it was the worst winter that Korea had ever gone through, was the winter of '51. And right at first, the equipment was not up to the type of weather that we were facing. Our uniforms wasn't up to snuff. It wasn't good enough. It didn't take them long. They got us some good stuff. I have to give them credit for that. We had the old shoe pack that just wasn't up to it, but it was up to the soldier. There was a lot of guys that just didn't take proper care of themselves, and but the winters was just unbelievable. The temperature fell. I don't have any idea how, but after watching television about Korean and stuff, it got really cold. And so that's the one thing that sticks in my mind as far as Vietnam. Talking to Vietnam veterans is that they went through hell, and I'm not taking a thing away from them. But the weather in Korea was unbelievable. I'm I'm sort of jumping back and forth here, but I was recalling that on Baldy is when I got wounded, and we had taken our objective, and we knew we were going to be have a counterattack. That we're going to come back to retake the hill. So we knew we were going to be in for it, and the gun was set up. And at this time, I was still an ammo bearer, and in the process, I had picked up my weapon as ammo bearer was the M1 carbine, and I picked up a Thompson submachine gun off a Chinese, and I was using that, and the gun was set up to where the route of approach where the Chinese was figuring out, well, they had no other choice. They just had one area, just like us. They had to come up in one place. So we had those places covered, and I was covering the flank of the machine gun. And when the fighting started, well, I was using this Thompson sub to cover the flank, which was a pretty good weapon for that particular job. And when all of a sudden there was this flash, and a mortar round came, it seemed like it was right in front of me, but it was probably several yards away. But anyway, I was very fortunate. I ended up being hit in the right leg and the right hand. And so the fellows on the gun started calling for a medic. And I forget the guy's name. I knew him, but I can't remember his name. But anyway, he heard the call. He was down in a trench at the time, and when he heard the call, well, he grabbed his bag and he jumped out of the trench to go up the hill to where I was, and at the moment that he got out of that trench, a mortar round came in to the trench right where he was, and the explosion knocked him on down the hill a ways, but he wasn't hit by anything other than a few rocks and what have you. But he got up to where I was, and he yelled out, who got hit? And some of the fellows said, Franklin did. And he come up there, and the guys tried to dress my wound on my hand because it was all chopped up, and it just looked like a bunch of hamburger. It turned out to not be as bad as it looked at first, but the only bandage that they seemed to come up with was a stomach bandage, which was quite large. I forget the dimensions of the bandage, but it was like 10 by 15 or something like that inches. And anyway, they just had my hand all wrapped up, and he started laughing when he saw it looked like a boxing glove. And when he took off the bandage and was cleaning up and everything, he used some language. He said, you know, you blankety blank, he says, you just saved my neck. He says, if I hadn't have got out of that trench when I did, he says, I wouldn't be here now. And so he got me fixed up, and it wasn't until the next morning that I was able to get off the hill, and the captain and the whole company was down to just a few people. First platoon was just wiped out almost altogether. There was 2 survivors, and by the time we daylight came, I'm sketchy actually on the number, but it seemed like there was, like 12 or 13 guys left out of the company. That was easy company. That was in September. I was wounded on September 4th of 51 on it seemed like the hill was 558 or something like that, but it was Baldy. And so we pulled off, and we were all sort of in a group, and there was another fellow that was with me that was wounded real bad. His name was Elliot, and I never knew. I went all the way to Sassapo, not to, that is to Pusan, at the Swedish hospital, him and I, and we went off the hill together, and he went to Japan because he was shot up real bad, and I wasn't all in that bad a shape actually, but after I got to Busan, I was informed that I was going to Japan, and I couldn't believe it. And it turned out that my right hand, my knuckle in my right hand was fractured, and so that got me to Japan. Okay, I rotated in somewhere between April and May of '52, and I felt very, very fortunate that I made it that far. I rotated out of, I'm not sure, I went by ship back to Sasebo, and I'm not sure if it was at Incheon or just where it was. But when I got to Sasebo, I remember that I was going down to the PX, and I was walking, and I looked to my right, and there was this little chapel, little church, and I thought that I had some thinking to do. So I went into this church, and I had a religious experience that I was sitting there in the pew, and I felt a presence, and I was so emotionally affected that I didn't even move my head, but it felt like God was right next to me, and so that, and I never will forget that feeling, and I will never forget it. So I felt real fortunate to get out of there alive.